You know, if you were to ask the average person, what do you think about racism? Most people would be like, racism, bad. We don't like racism. Nobody should be racist, right? And I would say I agree. Racism tends to be not good. But I would say that some people have the capacity to understand racism as far as like why people are racist, why people think the way they do. And not everybody has the capacity to do that. Some people, they have the capacity or want to understand like why this person was a serial murderer that like murdered 15 women. Some people like Chris Hansen are like, oh, this person's a predator. Why is this person a predator? And let's do research. Most people are like, nah, that person's a predator. Gotta get him out of here. He's bad. Right? For me, it comes to like relationships with people, whether it be romantic or, just regular relationships. So for me, I've always been fascinated by racism, especially as like a young person, and as an African American or a Black American, whatever they be labeling us now. And when I say racism, I mean the Webster Dictionary definition of racism. It says that a belief that a race is fundamentally determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. AKA, basically that somebody of a different race thinks their race is more superior than somebody else's race. That's the racism I'm talking about. None of this like sociology, American racism, where it's like, oh, this is systematic impressions and these type of people can't be racist toward. No, I'm talking about the good old regular definition of I think my race is better than your race kind of racism. And so I would say one thing, or the things that helped me kind of understand racism, was my prejudice and discrimination against women. Now, I know that sentence sounds crazy, but let me cook for a little bit. And I have to put this disclaimer out there because, this is the internet. I don't think it's okay to be racist towards anybody, nor do I think it's okay to discriminate against anybody based on their gender or sex or race or anything, right? But I will say that, like I said, me having a prejudice or acting on my prejudice and discrimination against women helped me understand racism. Now, when I say prejudice, I mean the definition of prejudice, which is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. And when I say discrimination, I mean the definition of discrimination of the unjust and prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, age, sex, or disability. So basically, if you want to say like what's the difference between the two, prejudice is basically like having a thought, and discrimination would be acting on that thought. So if you're discriminatory, you are prejudiced. But just because you're prejudiced or have a prejudiced thought doesn't mean you are discriminatory. Now, sit back because it's going to be a long couple of stories. I would say there's 3 instances in my life that really helped me understand the racism. And like I said, 2 of those had to do with how I interacted with women. So, all right, sit back and relax, watch this Terraria gameplay, and listen to my story. So, obviously, growing up as an African American male, or Black American, whatever you want to call it, in America, I have faced racial discrimination, right? And I specifically remember in 4th grade where I wanted to play with a couple of kids, and they were like, oh, you can't play with us because you're not white. And I was like, what? And that was the first time like my eyes were really open to racism. Even before that, like I've had to teach. I used to get bullied a lot, and I lived in a predominantly white area at the time, and teachers would never do anything about it when white kids were bullying me. And even if I told them or whatever, they would always basically never stop the white kids. But as soon as I ever tried to defend myself or talk back, I always got in trouble. But I didn't understand that was racism at the time, or racially motivated. And so, growing up and then obviously reading about Black history and stuff, I was like, why do white people hate us so much? I don't understand why, yeah, you understand like based off like what you read, but you're like, I don't understand why they thought, they were superior to us. Why did they think, why did they hate Black people? Why did they think, oh no, Black people aren't it, or, they're less than human, right? And so obviously watching certain movies, watching certain things, I was just like, man, this sucks. I hate racism, and I shouldn't be treated like that based on my race, right? And then I would say around maybe 15, I got my first girlfriend. And first of all, I shouldn't have even been in that relationship. And how I got into that relationship, that's a different story for a different day, maybe. But anyway, I started dating this girl, and she was of Caucasian descent. And I remember because I met her through a couple of other people and friends at the time. And I remember we only went out for like maybe a week and a half. I remember during one of the times we was going out, because our churches had collaborated with each other, she was like, hey, I want to come, visit you and see you or whatever. And I was like, all right, cool. Because at the time, like I said, I was going to church Monday, Friday, and Sunday. And I believe it was Friday we had planned to come see each other because we had Friday night church. And so I was like, yeah, well, come on Friday. I'll be there on Friday to come see you. And I remember that Friday came up and my parents were like, nah, we're not going to church this Friday. I was like, what? Huh? What? What you mean we're not going to church this Friday? We go to church every Friday. Why all of a sudden this particular Friday we're not going to church, right? And they were like, nah. I was like, okay, well, can I call somebody to come pick me up? They were like, nah, you not going to church, we not going to church. And I was mad because I was like, what the heck? I wanted to see my girlfriend at the time, because I was like, bruh, we already planned this thing. I wanted to see her, right? So I don't show up on Friday. And I remember, I think because at the time we were not going to the same school. So my best friend's cousins were basically how I got information at the time of like what was going on. So I remember talking to them. They were like, oh my gosh, she's upset and blah, 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 blah. And she said she's going to kill you and stab you and all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What is going on? And I was like, let me call her to see what's going on, because I'm just like, that sounds crazy. So I remember trying to call her or whatever. And she was like really irate and talk about, like I said, how she was gonna kill or not kill me, but she was like, oh, I should stab you, and what if I did this, and what if I follow you, and what if I make sure, and like all this like kind of stalkery stuff. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, did I get in a relationship with a crazy person? And I remember I was like, bro, I'm in a relationship with a crazy girl, right? So now my whole mental is kind of like shattered, because I'm like, she talking about she gonna stalk me, and if she ever see me with somebody else, she gonna like try to stab me or whatever, or be up in my business. It was kind of crazy. And I'm just like, what the heck? So I remember like I was just like distraught for like the rest of the week, or the rest of the next week or whatever. And I remember like my best friend was like pissed because like basically my whole personality, I was just like, oh my gosh, what if she's around the corner? What if this? What is that? So I remember we were going on a youth trip somewhere, and he was like, you know what? You're gonna break up with this girl because you hate going out with her. Because I was scared to break up with her. So you hate going out with her. You're scared to break up. So you're breaking up with her, right? And I remember I was like, well, I don't got a cell phone. And I remember I called her using somebody's else cell phone and broke up with her, right? And I was like, but what if she was like, bro, she not gonna do nothing, bro. She's not gonna do nothing to you. Nothing's gonna happen, right? Which is true. Nothing ended up happening, but like, I was still scared of her a little bit. And I think that was when I was 15. And that kind of stuck with me because like later on, I remember there is another in high school. I was probably like, maybe I was like 17 at the time. Another white girl had liked me, and I remember being like, nah, I can't date her because she's a white girl, and the last white girl I dated, she was crazy. She was crazy and tried to stab me, right? So I was like, nah, like she wasn't ugly or anything. It's just, I was just like, nah, I can't date her, right? Because last white girl I dated was crazy. So I kind of had this like basically prejudice in my mind, and I discriminated against her because I was like, I am not going out with this woman because she is white. And last time I went out, white women are crazy. Like that was my whole thought process, which is crazy because like I was friends with white girls. Like I was cool with white girls. There was even some other white girls I had a crush, but like certain other white girls, I was like, nah. Like every time I would think, oh, could I go out with the white girl though? Because last white girl, she was crazy. She tried to kill me. So that's how I treated certain white women. Like, and there was other white women that had liked me. I was like, nah, I'm not. If you're white, nope, I can't go out with you because that's in my mind. I was like, you're crazy. You're a crazy person, and I don't want to die, and I don't want to put my life in the line. And I remember it wasn't until I was like 18, I was talking to somebody, and they said, don't you think that's a little unfair? Like, just because a person is white, you won't go out with them. And I was like, why not? I can, and at first I'm in my feelings. I'm like, well, I can do whatever I want. Because people reject me for all the time because I'm a nerd, because I'm this and I'm that or whatever, right? But I remember I thought about it later on, and I was like, that is unfair. I said, because I don't like people being like, "Oh, I can't go out with you because you're black," or I can't go out with you because you're this." So it's not fair to also for me to do that to somebody just because I had one bad experience with a white woman. I can't just be like, "Oh, well, all white women are crazy." I said that's the same thing that racist people do. They have a bad experience with whatever race. Let's say they have a bad experience with a black person, like, well, all black people are thugs, or they have bad experience with Asian people. All Asian people are like this. All Hispanic people are like this. And I was like, oh, I'm doing exactly what racist people do. And that was like when it clicked in my head, and I was like, oh, that's why people be racist sometimes. They have a bad experience with somebody of a different race, and they're like, well, all people of this race now are like this. And I would say that was my first experience because, like I said, I was prejudiced because I had technically never dated the other girl that liked me. So I was prejudiced because I was basing something off something I'd never had a real interaction. But I was also discriminating because I was basing it on my past experience, and it was an unjust discrimination based on my past experience of another white girl I had dated. So that was my first instance. My second instance had to do with college, which had nothing to do with discrimination. But I majored in sociology in college. And in sociology, if y'all don't know, is really just simply it's the study of society. That's like the basic definition of it. And so you're different, you're studying all kinds of stuff, gender, politics, religion, why people are the way they are, philosophy, all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I remember being in a class with a teacher and we would talk about like racism and stuff. And then basically he kind of explained how, some people, they don't interact with certain groups. Like they grow up without interacting with certain groups. And, this is something I couldn't relate to because in my area, when I was about from the first area, once I moved to the second area, it was very diverse. So I grew up with around a lot of other, like I said, Hispanic people, Africans, Asians, whites, blacks, everybody. But he was like, some people don't grow up with a lot of certain groups. So all they know is what they see on TV. And if what they see on TV is pushing a particular message of a certain race all the time, then eventually those people would just believe what they see on TV. And so they start to be having these notions of certain people because they've never experienced based on what they see on television. I was like, oh. And he was talking about, for example, like when it comes to black people in crime, if the news or whatever just shows about black people always committing crime all the time, and they're like, oh, black people commit this kind of crimes, and they give statistics like, oh, if you're most likely to be black, you'll be whatever. And so certain white people will see that because they don't interact with black people, and they're like, oh, all black people are criminals, or a lot of black people are criminals because every time I see on the news, it's always black people committing these types of crimes and X, Y, and Z, so they must be these type of people. Or like, the whole like immigrants taking their jobs. They're like, oh, the immigrants, the legal immigrants are always working this kind of jobs and this kind of jobs, and they're always taking this, and people aren't getting these jobs, and the media will say they're not getting these jobs because immigrants are taking their jobs. They're like, oh, these immigrants are taking our jobs. And so I was like, oh, that makes sense of why people believe that, because they watch something enough times and they've never interacted with the people, so they don't know. So there's like, well, and this was back in like 2010 probably, because it's a sophomore year in college, where people still like somewhat believe the news and the media. So they're like, well, the media wouldn't lie. They keep saying about this thing. They're giving numbers and statistics, so it must be the truth. And I was like, oh, that's also how some people become racist, because, they believe a certain narrative off the media and news based on what they see. And because they don't interact with those people, there's nothing to really refute that narrative, because they're just like, I've never hung around these people, and the news keeps telling me this is how these type of people act, so it must be true. And then I would say the third thing to help me realize like why people are kind of racist or how they get that way was basically 2022, the worst year of my life. And I would say like during half of the worst year of my life, like I said, I had a girlfriend. And I would say I started to get sick around like mid 2022. And unfortunately, like I said, my church community had broke up like 3 months prior to that. Like, so my whole community and what I've been part of 20 plus years is kind of shattered. And then I started getting like really sick. And then my girlfriend dumped me like right as my sickness, like at the beginning of my sickness of really getting sick. And she kind of just dumped me with like no real explanation. There was nothing like, like I said, we hadn't had no fight or anything. Like I remember she had just got back from mini vacation. I was watching her cats. Like everything was like good. Like things were kind of a little off, but everything was like good. Like we weren't. I remember we had just a month before talked about like really like trying to lock in and like not let our differences and things going with the things that are happening in our life kind of break us apart. And so I thought we were good, but then she was just like, nah, I don't think I can do this anymore. And because I'm gonna be too busy, which was crazy because I was just like, what do you mean you're gonna be too busy? Like you are working 50 hours a week and you just got a job that I encourage you to like apply for. Now you're not gonna be working 50 hours a week. You're gonna be working way less hours. I don't understand. And she basically didn't really give me an explanation. So she kind of just dumped me for no reason after everything, everything I did and all the relationships we stuff we had. And after she was telling me all this stuff about how she'll never just leave up and leave or whatever, and we'll stick together and all that. So I was just like, what the heck? And I remember later that week, I went to the emergency room because my sickness got really bad. I remember I couldn't even like stand up at one point with my stomach. It was hurting so bad. And come to find out, like I was having stomach ulcers, and then I was having a lot of mental issues. I remember going to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I remember I went to the emergency room three times that year. I remember going, like, it lasted from 2022 to 2023. I remember going to like a brain scan doctor, gastroenterologist, going to, like I said, my regular doctor like every like week and a half. I remember going to a heart doctor because I was having like pain in my chest and stuff. It was just horrible. And during 2022 and 2023, I became a hikikomori, right? Or a shut-in. And so I stayed online. Basically, I stayed in the house all the time. Literally, the only time I went out was to go either see a doctor, go to the emergency room, or go get food. Maybe I might have like went and got food like maybe like twice a month or something. But that's really about it. I'd stay shut in my room. And because of that, I was chronically online. And like I said, what was going online? 2022, 2023? The gender wars. The gender wars was going at it. So I just got dumped. And like I said, the sickness and everything was so bad. I remember like that happened in the beginning of July. I didn't really even get upset about everything until September. That's how bad it was. Because I literally was like, okay, I got to worry about my own health and my own like physical well-being first. And then I remember September, I was like, oh yeah, my girlfriend did dump me with no reason. And then I started thinking about all the stuff she said, and I was like, man, this was whack. And I started to get like really upset about certain stuff because I was just like, I can't believe she would just do this and blah blah blah. And then that's when I really started going through the phases of a breakup. And like I said, the gender wars were all the rage going on. So I'm watching social media. I'm seeing women talking about men are trash, and if you don't take me to the Cheesecake Factory, you ain't a real man. And men are all this, and men are predators, and men are not how they used to be. And if they don't got money, then they ain't a real man. And I didn't have a lot of money at the time I was dating her. And so, I'm watching that, and then I'm listening to the fellas talking about how, yeah, women, they'll just use you. They'll say they'll love you, and then they'll break up with you. And if you don't got a lot of money, they're gonna leave you, and they're all spoiled, and they're all hoes, and they're all thoughts. And so I'm seeing both sides. I'm seeing the women talk about how men are trash, and then I'm seeing how, the men are extreme red pill dudes are talking about how women are trash. And so, like I said, I'm online for about a good year watching this stuff. Like that's not the only thing I was watching, but I'm watching the gender wars rage on, right? And so eventually, that's all you see, and your mind starts to get warped. And so I'm starting to believe the stuff I'm seeing on social media because, like I said, I'm not really interacting with women now. Like, so I'm starting to think modern day women really are thinking how social media is portraying how they are. And so, like I said, this goes on for about a whole year. And finally I get over my sickness and stuff from maybe around, I would say around maybe April of 2023, but I don't have a job yet because I'm not working the whole time. So eventually I get a job working at a hotel in August of that year, 2023. And like I said, because I've been watching the gender war stuff and see, I'm like, oh my gosh. And if, in case y'all don't know about the hotel industry, most of the time in the hotel industry, I would say there's more women that work. I would say it's like a 70-30. It's like 70% women and like 30% men. Because at the hotel I was working at, only the general manager, the assistant general manager, and the 2 sales managers were like the only guys. And then we had like 2 other housemen. And I was working in housekeeping. Everybody else was a woman. Every other person that worked front desk was a woman except for one. And Yeah, we had like everybody else that was in sales, except for, like I said, the two guys were women, and then everybody else in housekeeping. I was the only male housekeeper at the time because we had two housemen, like I said. So there's just you have a lot of women that's working there. That's what I'm trying to get at. And so I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I gotta interact with modern women. I'm thinking to myself, oh man, like, and then the guests are gonna be women. So I'm just like I said, I'm watching all the stuff and talking about how women hate men, basically, and the men talk about how women hate men. So I'm thinking women be hating men. Now I'm like, that's how it is now. And so I start working at this job, and I, like I said, have prejudice in my mind because of based on what I see. Now I don't act on that prejudice. I'm not discriminating against nobody, but that's what I'm thinking. And I'm glad I worked that job because none of the women like acted like how the women were on social media, and it really was like really refreshing. I would say there was like two particular instances or like things that really like made me be like, oh no, wait, women are not like how social media portrays. And one of them had to do with I was working in the hallway because I was a housekeeper. I was working in the hallway, and I remember this black woman was like, "Oh, can you help me find the gym?" And I remember it was like my first week there, and I was trying to like I still kind of knew what the layout. So I said, "Yeah, sure, let's try to find it." And I was on the second floor, and I was like, "You said the elevator here," and she was like, "I don't know if the stairs." She said, "I'd rather walk the stairs," and I was like, "Okay, let me see." And I remember going down the stairs, like, "Oh, the stairs lead here and stuff." And I was like, "Okay." So if you go down the stairs this way, this is where it goes to the gym. And she was like, "Okay," and she was like. And she looked me dead in my eyes and she was like, "Thank you for helping me. I really appreciate it." And man, when I tell you that lifted my spirits for the whole rest of the day, I was like, bruh. And then like I also had this front desk, coworker, because you have to interact with the front desk when you're housekeeping. And then like I would switch between like sometimes housekeeping and housemen. And she was always nice to me all the time. Like she always usually had a smile on her face. Even when she was upset, she was still kind to me. And I remember like I think maybe about a week before I left that job, I remember telling her, I was like, you helped like really dispel some of the stuff that was going on because I told her about like my situation about how I was like a shut-in and stuff and like how I seen like how women act on social media. And I said, you never acted like that. And that really like put in perspective. I said, wait a minute. Most people are just regular people just trying to live and survive and do their jobs. And she was like, yeah, she was like, most people aren't like how social media likes to portray. And like, even the other people that I was working with in the back in my job in the laundry area, like they were really chill. And come to find out, a lot of them were Christian, like some of them were Christian like me, and like they were really chill. But basically, it all came down to really show like how social media really warped my mind. My mind was warped because I hadn't been interacting with women for over a year. I really thought, oh, okay, this is what modern day women are like. When I was like, nah, that's not the case. Modern day women are not like that. And it made sense because I was like, even when I went to like get food or whatever, women aren't sitting there like, oh, men disgusting, we hate men. But I was like, that must be how people be racist because, for example, if they have, like I said, a bad interaction with a certain race, and then they go online in social media and they're like, yeah, people of this race always act like this, people of this race all like that, and then you have other people of the same race being like, yeah, we don't like people of this race because they act like that. I can see how that can warp somebody's mind and be like, oh, this is why black people are like this, or this is why Asian people are like that, or Hispanic people or white people are like this, because it's like, okay, I had a bad experience with this person, and now I go on social media and just confirms all my bad experiences. Same thing with me getting broke up. I was like, man, I have a bad experience with the person, I was in a relationship with. And because of that, and then going online and seeing all the other bad experiences people talk about and stuff, I was like, oh, that's how these women are nowadays. So I can see them like, that's how these blackies are. That's how white people are. That's how Asian people are. And it's like, man, that sucks. And it just kind of basically reiterates my point that I've made before is like, hey, man, don't let social media like basically kind of warp your mind just because you've had like a bad experience with a certain type of race or even a certain type of gender or whatever. Like social media to me is not real life. It's a highlight of real life, but it's not all real life. Like I said, most people are not extreme weirdos go around me like, I hate men, I hate women, I hate people of this race. Most people are just trying to work, especially nowadays, they're just trying to work to be able to provide enough money for their family and eat and have a shelter. And so that's really all I had to say. And like, that's how like I came to really understand like why certain people can be racist. So now I understand why sometimes when certain people, they have a certain, stereotype or prejudice or whatever, I have a little bit more sympathy for them because especially if they're like, well, I've had a bad experience with this particular race, or I've had a bad experience with women or whatever, I have a little bit more sympathy because I'm like, oh, okay, I can understand, and I'm not so quick to just be like, oh, this person's racist, oh, they're bad, get out of here, we don't like you, because there's no reason for you to not be racist in 2024. You're dumb. But it makes sense when, like I said, you got all this media programming, you got, people actually having real life experiences. You just don't know. So really, this kind of thing was just maybe me to be like, hey man, maybe sometimes have a little sympathy for people because you just don't know the reasons why. And like I said, just because I understand why a person is racist doesn't mean I agree with it. Like I said before in my disclaimer, I don't think it's okay to be racist towards anybody or discriminate anybody based on their gender or sex. But like I said, like, it makes sense, like, when you think about it, especially with the media program. It doesn't make sense to be racist, but it makes sense to why a person might become racist. So that's all I really have to say, man. I know this video was a lot longer than it normally is. If you enjoyed and you watched all the way through, leave a like, have somebody watch this video, and thanks. Okay, bye.